At 9:30 on a rain-soaked Friday in October, Marcus Brennan opened his apartment door and found the impossible standing on his doorstep. Victoria Hayes wasn't wearing the tailored charcoal suit that made board members sit straighter. No Hermes scarf, no leather briefcase that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. Just a drenched coat hanging off her shoulders like surrender mascara, tracking dark rivers down pale cheeks, hair loose and wild in a way he'd never seen during 3.5 years of working under her command. She held a manila envelope against her chest like a shield, or maybe a white flag. The CEO of Hayes Industrial, 420 million in annual revenue, 890 employees, the woman who'd inherited her grandfather's steel fabrication empire at 30 and transformed it into something fiercer, was shaking. Marcus's hand stayed frozen on the doorknob. His brain scrambled to process the disconnect between the woman who commanded boardrooms like battlefields and this rain-soaked figure who looked like she'd been wandering streets for hours. Her voice came out raw, stripped of the executive polish that usually armored every syllable. "I accepted you quitting, but I can't accept losing you." The words hit Marcus's chest like a physical blow. 5 days since he'd walked into her corner office with a resignation letter. 5 days of silence so complete he'd convinced himself she'd already moved on, already replaced him in her mental org chart with someone less broken. Now she was here, and the careful distance he'd been building between himself and the wreckage of his career was collapsing with every breath she took. Behind him, the apartment felt suddenly smaller. The second-hand couch he'd bought after the breakup. The coffee table stacked with motorcycle magazines he hadn't had time to read in months. The pizza box on the counter, the first real food he'd eaten in weeks that wasn't a protein bar consumed at his desk. This was his life now, small and quiet and his own. And Tori Hayes, who'd never visited an employee's home in her 8 years running Hayes Industrial, was standing in the hallway looking at him like he held something she desperately needed. The question burning in Marcus's throat came out barely above a whisper. "How did you find my address?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I'm the CEO. I have access to HR files." "That's probably a violation of something." "Add it to the list of rules I've broken tonight." Thunder rolled overhead. Rain hammered the building's overhang, creating a curtain of water that isolated them from the rest of the world. Marcus became aware of his own appearance, rumpled t-shirt, 2 days of stubble, the hollow look of someone who'd been staring at ceilings instead of sleeping. 5 days ago, he'd been the rising star. Director of Operations at 38, the guy Tori trusted with the biggest acquisition in company history. Now he was unemployed and standing barefoot in his doorway while his former boss trembled in the rain. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. He should invite her in. He should close the door. He should do something other than stand there drowning in the weight of everything they'd never said to each other. Tori's grip tightened on the envelope. Water dripped from her coat onto the worn carpet. "I need to explain," she started, then stopped. Started again. "I need you to understand why I'm here, because I practiced this speech in my car for 20 minutes, and I'm still terrified I'll say it wrong." Marcus found his voice. "Come inside. You're soaking wet." "If I come inside, I might lose my nerve." "Then lose it where it's dry." He stepped back. After a heartbeat's hesitation, Tori crossed the threshold into his apartment, bringing with her the smell of rain and expensive perfume and the ghost of a life he'd just walked away from 5 days earlier. Marcus arrived at Hayes Industrial at 6:47 on a Monday morning, earlier than necessary, but not early enough to outrun the knot of dread that had been tightening in his stomach for weeks. The building stood dark except for the corner office on the top floor where Tori's light already blazed. She'd be on her second espresso by now, reading overnight emails from the West Coast building, the mental fortress that would carry her through another day of impossible decisions. He took the stairs instead of the elevator. His legs needed something to do besides carry him toward a conversation that would end everything. The resignation letter sat in his messenger bag, printed on crisp white paper that felt like it weighed 10 pounds. He'd written it at 6 that morning after staring at his ceiling all night, watching shadows shift across plaster, while his brain ran through every possible version of this moment. None of them ended well. Tori's assistant wasn't at her desk yet. The executive floor existed in that strange pre-dawn quiet where the hum of fluorescent lights became the loudest sound in the world. Marcus's footsteps on polished tile echoed like accusations. He knocked on her office door, even though it stood open. Old habit. Tori didn't like surprises. She looked up from her computer, and something in her face shifted when she saw him. Not quite a smile. Tori didn't smile at work, not really, but a softening around her eyes that she reserved for the people she trusted. The people she trusted. Past tense in about 3 minutes. Marcus, you're here early. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Good. I wanted to discuss the tri-state integration timeline before David gets in. The VP of Operations is still dragging his feet on the facility consolidation, and I need your take on whether we can force the issue or if that'll blow up the whole. I need to resign. The words came out flat. No preamble, no build-up. Just the truth dropped between them like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Tori's hands stilled on her mouse. For 3 seconds, she didn't move, didn't blink. Then she leaned back in her chair with the careful control of someone who'd just taken a punch but refused to show it. I see. Her voice stayed level. CEO mode, even as something flickered behind those ice blue eyes. Do you have a letter? Marcus pulled the envelope from his bag. His hands didn't shake. That surprised him. He'd expected tremors, the physical manifestation of ending the best job he'd ever had. Instead, his fingers felt numb as he slid the paper across her desk. Tori read it without picking it up. Her eyes tracked across the lines. He'd agonized over the corporate pleasantries that couldn't hide what screamed between them. Effective immediately, personal reasons. She looked up. Can you outwork the 2 weeks for transition? I'd prefer to leave today. Is this about the merger? The control in her voice cracked just slightly, just enough for Marcus to hear the real question underneath. Is this about me? Did I push too hard? I can restructure your team, bring in support. It's not about the merger. The lie tasted bitter. It was absolutely about the merger, about the 95-hour weeks and the mistakes piling up and the way he'd nearly torpedoed a $50 million contract because his brain had stopped processing numbers correctly. But it was also about the other thing, the thing they never talked about, the late-night phone calls that lasted hours, the Saturday mornings in her garage with engine grease under his nails and her laugh echoing off concrete walls, the slow-building ache of wanting something he could never have. It's about me. I'm burned out, Tori, making mistakes. I barely recognize myself anymore. She flinched at her first name. At work, she was always Ms. Hayes, always the title, the distance, the barrier that kept things professional. But right now in this office at dawn with his resignation letter, between them like a corpse, he couldn't pretend they were just CEO and operations director. They'd stopped being just that 18 months ago. Tori stood, crossed to the window overlooking the manufacturing floor. 3 stories down, the third shift was ending, workers clocking out after 8 hours of making steel into something useful. The organized chaos of a company that never slept. A company she'd built from her grandfather's legacy into something formidable. A company Marcus was abandoning. You've been invaluable to Hayes Industrial. Her back stayed turned. If you need references, recommendations, thank you. He should leave. Get up, walk out, start the process of collecting his things from his office. Instead, he stood there memorizing the line of her shoulders, the way morning light caught in her dark hair, the slight tremble in her hands that she was trying to hide. For the record, Marcus heard himself say, working with you has been the best part of my career. I hope you know that. Tori turned. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely. He saw exhaustion there. Hurt. Something deeper that made his chest constrict. Then she rebuilt it brick by brick until only the CEO remained. I'll have HR process the paperwork. You can drop your laptop and badge at reception whenever you're ready. Marcus nodded, turned toward the door. His hand on the knob, he paused. I'm sorry. Don't be. Her voice softened. Take care of yourself, Marcus. He left before she could see his face. 18 months earlier, May 2024, the note sat on Marcus's coffee table, weighted down by the keys Jessica had left behind when she walked out. I can't do this anymore. You're married to your job. I'm just the mistress. Don't call me. No signature, no forwarding address. 4 years reduced to 3 sentences and a set of keys. Marcus read it for the 12th time. Outside his window, Richmond's Friday night energy hummed. People laughing, living, connecting. He felt separated from all of it by glass and exhaustion and the spreadsheet he'd been staring at for 3 hours without processing a single number. The apartment echoed too loud now. Every room screamed Jessica's absence. The furniture they'd picked out together, the walls they'd painted last summer, the bedroom where they'd made plans that apparently only he'd been serious about. His phone buzzed. Victoria Hayes, 11:47 at night. Marcus almost didn't answer. Any work call this late meant crisis, and he didn't have crisis left in him tonight. But Tori didn't call unless it mattered, so he picked up. Her voice came through, sharp and alert, probably fueled by her fourth espresso. I need the Q3 projections revised. Legal found issues with the language around the Springfield contract. I'll have it to you by Monday. Silence. Then something that sounded almost like concern. Are you okay? The question landed wrong. Too personal, too perceptive. Victoria Hayes didn't do personal. She did quarterly targets and operational efficiency and strategic pivots. She'd built Hayes Industrial from her grandfather's legacy into an industry leader by being smarter and tougher and more ruthless than everyone around her. She didn't ask employees if they were okay. Marcus's throat tightened. Long week. More silence. He could hear her thinking, weighing words with the same precision she applied to million-dollar decisions. The projections can wait until Tuesday. Take the weekend. Actually take it. Don't work. He blinked at his dark reflection in the window. You never tell people not to work. I'm telling you now. Her tone shifted, something almost soft underneath the executive polish. You've been running flat out for months. The merger prep is killing everyone, but you've been carrying more than your share. Take 2 days. Sleep. Eat something that didn't come from a plastic container. Come back Tuesday. Marcus should have said thank you and hung up. Should have maintained the professional distance that kept his world in order. Instead, exhaustion and pain stripped away his filters. My girlfriend left me. The words hung in the silence like smoke. Marcus couldn't believe he'd said them out loud, especially to her. Victoria Hayes, who was so far above his pay grade, she might as well exist in a different atmosphere. Tori, who he'd been half in love with since his first week at Hayes Industrial, when she demolished a vendor's predatory contract in a conference room, and he'd realized he was watching a master at work. I'm sorry. Her voice came out quiet, genuinely gentle. I'm sorry. It's fine. It was coming. She was right anyway. I put the job first. I had always put the job first. Marcus, I should go. I'll get you those projections Tuesday. He hung up before she could respond, then immediately felt like an idiot. You didn't trauma dump on the CEO. You didn't hang up mid-sentence. You definitely didn't confess personal failures while she was calling about work. His phone buzzed 30 seconds later. A text from Tori. For what it's worth, anyone who gives you an ultimatum between them and your career doesn't deserve you. Take the weekend. That's an order. Then 10 seconds later. Also, you didn't let me finish. Legal can wait until Wednesday. Tuesday is too soon. Marcus stared at the messages. Something warm and dangerous unfurled in his chest. He typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on the safest option. Thank you. Her reply came immediately. Don't thank me. Just rest. He did rest for the first time in months. And when he came back Wednesday, Tori was waiting at his desk with coffee, the good stuff from her private machine, not the break room sludge, and a quiet question about whether he was really okay. They ended up talking for 20 minutes about nothing related to work. Her grandfather's original machine shop in Cleveland, his college years as a philosophy major who accidentally fell into operations management, the weather, books they'd read. It was the first real conversation they'd had as people instead of CEO and employee. Over the next 4 months, something shifted. The late-night work calls transformed into something neither of them named. It started innocently enough. Tori would call about a project timeline. They'd resolve the issue in 5 minutes, and somehow they'd still be talking an hour later. Marcus learned that she woke at 4:30 every morning to work out in her building's gym while listening to murder podcasts. That she'd wanted to be an architect before her grandfather died and left her an empire she couldn't refuse. That she ate the same breakfast every day for 8 years. Oatmeal, blueberries, black coffee, because decisions about food felt like wasted mental energy. That she was lonely in a way only people born into wealth and isolated by it could be. Tori learned that Marcus had started a road novel in college about a man who buys a vintage motorcycle and rides cross-country with no destination. That his father taught him to weld in their garage those Saturday afternoons, the closest thing to church Marcus's family ever practiced. That he still dreamed about roads that led nowhere, about freedom measured in miles instead of meetings. That he was lonely in a way only people who'd sacrificed everything for success could be. One night in late August, Tori called at 2 in the morning. Her voice came through slightly fuzzy, like she was lying down in the dark. "Do you still want that motorcycle?" Marcus was in his kitchen making tea he didn't need because his hands needed something to do. "God, yes. I've been watching online auctions. There's a 1973 Triumph Bonneville in Cleveland that's perfect. Needs work, but the bones are solid. Why don't you buy it?" "Money's tight right now. The breakup was expensive. Had to buy out Jessica's half of the furniture first month and deposit on my new place." He kicked at a piece of tile grout. "Plus, I'd need somewhere to work on it. My apartment building doesn't allow garage projects." "You could use my garage." Marcus stopped moving. "What?" "I have a 3-car garage. I use one space. The other 2 just collect dust." She said it casually, like she was offering to share a printer. "If you buy the bike, you could restore it there." "Tori, I can't." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because it's weird. Because you think I'm offering out of pity." Her voice sharpened. "I'm not. I'm offering because you light up when you talk about that bike, and I'd like to see you build something for yourself instead of just for the company. If that makes you uncomfortable, forget I mentioned it." Marcus stood on his kitchen floor, the world reorganizing itself around a simple offer that felt anything but simple. Victoria Hayes wanted to help him restore a motorcycle, wanted to see him happy. The implications made his heart pound against his ribs. "I'll think about it." "Think fast. That Triumph won't stay available forever." He bought the bike 2 weeks later. $4,200 that made his savings account scream, but filled something in his chest that had been empty for years. The Triumph arrived on a flatbed trailer, rust-spotted carburetors, gummed with old gas, but beautiful in the way broken things waiting for repair always were. Marcus texted Tori on a Friday night. "Garage tomorrow 10 a.m. Her response came within seconds. "Bring coffee." Those Saturday mornings became sacred. Marcus would arrive at 10 with 2 large coffees, and Tori would already be in the garage wearing old jeans and a flannel shirt that made her look like someone's younger sister instead of a CEO. They'd work in comfortable silence, broken by conversation, her asking about engine specs, him explaining the difference between carburetors and fuel injection, both of them carefully not acknowledging that they were building something more dangerous than a motorcycle. In October, Tori brought up architecture. They were sitting on the garage floor, taking a break, the Triumph gleaming with fresh chrome that Marcus had spent 3 hours polishing. "My grandfather wanted me to take over Hayes Industrial from the time I could walk." She picked at the label on her water bottle. "He'd take me to the factory floor when I was 8, 9 years old. Show me how steel got transformed into something useful. Tell me stories about building the company from nothing." "That sounds suffocating." She looked up. "It was suffocating. I wanted to design buildings. I had this whole plan of architecture school at Cornell internship with a firm in New York, working my way up until I could start my own practice." Her smile turned bitter. "Then he died. Heart attack at 68. And suddenly I'm 30 years old inheriting a $180 million company I never wanted but couldn't turn down because it would have been disrespecting everything he built." Marcus set down his wrench. "Do you regret it?" "Every single day." She met his eyes. "And not at all. Both things are true." That honesty, that raw admission that she contained multitudes, that success and resentment could coexist in the same person, felt like a gift. Like Tori was showing him something she'd never shown anyone else. "What about you?" She shifted to face him fully. "The novel you never finished. Do you regret not writing it?" Marcus thought about the manuscript file gathering digital dust on his hard drive. 12,000 words of a story about freedom he'd been too afraid to chase. Every single day, and not at all. They both laughed, the sound echoing off concrete walls and exposed rafters. For a moment, the space between them felt charged with possibility. Then Tori's phone buzzed, a work crisis that needed immediate attention, and the moment passed. But something had shifted. From that Saturday forward, they weren't just CEO and employee playing at being friends. They were 2 people recognizing each other's cages and offering something that looked like a key. June 2020. The merger begins. Gordon Fletcher addressed the executive team with the grim satisfaction of a general announcing war. Hayes Industrial is acquiring Tri-State Industries for $200 million. This merger will double our manufacturing footprint and cement our position as the dominant player in steel fabrication. He swept his gaze across the conference room. This is a test of our capacity. Weakness has no place here. Marcus sat between David Sullivan and Helen Morrison, watching Gordon's performance with growing unease. The board member had opposed every progressive initiative Tory had implemented in the past 2 years. Better benefits, reasonable work-life policies, the employee feedback program that actually listened. Gordon belonged to the old guard, the men who'd built Hayes Industrial, alongside Tory's grandfather, and still believed that employees were resources to be consumed. Tory stood at the head of the table nodding along with Gordon's speech but watching Marcus. When their eyes met, he saw the question there. "Can you do this?" He gave a slight nod. Yes, he could lead the merger integration. He could prove her faith in him wasn't misplaced. That confidence lasted exactly 3 weeks. The first week, Marcus worked 90 hours. The second, 95. By the third week, he'd stopped counting because the numbers made him nauseous. He lived on coffee and protein bars and 4 hours of sleep stitched together like a quilt made of desperation. The motorcycle restoration stopped. The Triumph sat untouched in Tory's garage, a monument to the person Marcus used to be before the merger devoured him whole. The late-night phone calls with Tory stopped too. They were in the office together until midnight most nights anyway. No need for stolen conversations when they were physically in the same building. But the dynamic changed. At work, Tory became all business, sharp questions, impossible. Deadlines, the weight of her expectations like gravity. She needed him to be the operations director who could handle anything, not the man she laughed with over engine grease and morning coffee. Marcus pushed himself to meet every demand. He reviewed contracts until his eyes blurred, managed integration teams across 3 time zones, negotiated with tri-state executives who saw the merger as a hostile takeover and treated Hayes' staff like invaders. By early August, he was making mistakes. Small ones at first: transposed numbers in spreadsheets, missed emails, forgotten follow-ups. Then bigger ones. He sent sensitive merger documents to the wrong distribution list, mixed up meeting times, and left a tri-state VP waiting in an empty conference room for 40 minutes. Snapped at a colleague who asked a reasonable question. Tory noticed. She always noticed. "Marcus, my office." The words came on a Thursday afternoon in late August, her tone leaving no room for argument. He followed her down the hall, dread pooling in his stomach like cold water. In 3.5 years at Hayes Industrial, he'd never been called to her office for a reprimand. He'd been the golden child, the one who exceeded expectations. Not anymore. Tory closed the door behind them and gestured to the chair across from her desk. Marcus sat. She didn't. Instead, she leaned against the desk with her arms crossed, those ice blue eyes reading him like a balance sheet. "Talk to me. About what? About why you're falling apart." Her voice stayed level, but her jaw was tight. "You missed the tri-state call this morning. You've sent me 3 reports this week with errors that aren't like you. Your team says you're irritable. What's going on?" The careful walls Marcus had built crumbled under the weight of her attention. He was so tired of pretending he had this under control when every day felt like drowning. "I'm drowning. The merger is too big. I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I'm working all the time, not sleeping, feel like I'm vibrating out of my skin, and I still can't keep up." Tory was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved around her desk, sat in the chair beside him, instead of behind it, abandoning the power position for something that felt almost like an equal, and said something that broke his heart. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you trusted me with this, because I didn't want to let you down." "Marcus." She leaned forward, elbows on knees close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle. "You're not letting me down. You're human. This merger is massive. I should have seen the strain." Her voice dropped lower. "I should have protected you better." "It's not your job to protect me." "It is, actually. I'm the CEO. My people are my responsibility." She stopped herself. "And you matter. Your well-being matters. If this merger costs you your health, it's not worth it." Marcus's chest felt tight. "I don't know what to do." "We restructure. I bring in consultants to take half your load. You start leaving at 7 every night, no exceptions. You take weekends off. Tori, the timeline stretches. I'll handle the board. She met his eyes. I need you functional more than I need you fast. Can you accept that? He wanted to believe that restructuring would fix it, that working less would restore him, that he could find his way back to the person he'd been before the merger consumed him whole. But somewhere deep in his bones, Marcus knew the truth. The problem wasn't just the hours. It was the disappearance of himself. The way work had devoured everything. His writing, his motorcycle, his late-night conversations with Tori that made him feel seen. He'd become a function instead of a person valuable only for productivity. And he was terrified that if he stopped producing, he'd stop existing. I'll try. The restructuring helped for exactly 10 days. Then the Tri-State CEO threatened to walk from the merger over intellectual property disputes, and Marcus spent 72 hours straight negotiating with lawyers and finance teams and executives who saw him as an obstacle instead of an ally. He didn't sleep, barely ate, lived on adrenaline and spite, in the knowledge that if this deal fell through, Tori's reputation would take the hit. She'd staked her credibility on this merger. On him. When the crisis resolved, IP disputes settled. Merger back on track. Marcus went home at 3 in the morning on a Wednesday, collapsed on his couch, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. His hands shook. His chest ached. He felt like static, like a radio stuck between stations broadcasting noise without signal. At 6, he opened his laptop and started writing. Dear Tori, I'm resigning effective immediately. This isn't about the merger, the company, or your leadership. It's about me saving my own life before there's nothing left to save. Thank you for everything. You've been the best boss I've ever had, and working with you has been the privilege of my career. I'm sorry I can't see the merger through. I'm sorry I'm not strong enough, but I have to leave before I disappear completely. Marcus. He read it once, forced himself not to edit or second guess, and sent it before courage could fail. Then he closed his laptop, lay down on his couch, and fell asleep for 14 hours straight. When he woke, his phone showed 6 missed calls from Tori and a text that said, "Only please come to the office. We need to talk." Marcus didn't go. He couldn't face her, couldn't withstand the disappointment or the logic or the inevitable conversation where she tried to fix what was unfixable. Instead, he texted back, "I meant what I wrote. I'm done. I'm sorry." She didn't respond. The next day, HR called to confirm his resignation and discuss final paycheck logistics. Professional, efficient, no drama. Marcus signed the separation paperwork electronically, arranged to return his laptop and badge through the mailroom when he knew Tori would be in meetings, and spent his first Thursday as an unemployed person cleaning his apartment with manic energy. He scrubbed counters, organized closets, threw out the takeout containers that had accumulated like evidence of failure. Tried not to think about Tori's face when she read his resignation. Tried not to think about the late-night conversations they'd never have again. Tried not to think about the motorcycle still sitting in her garage, half restored and abandoned like everything else good he'd let slip through his fingers. By Friday evening, the apartment was spotless, and Marcus felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything but exhaustion. He ordered pizza, actual food, not protein bars, and was halfway through his second slice when someone knocked on his door. He wasn't expecting visitors. His friends had long since stopped inviting him places. His family lived 3 states away in Ohio. For a confused moment, Marcus wondered if he'd ordered something online and forgotten. He opened the door, and there she was. Back to the rain. Tori stood in Marcus's living room, water dripping from her coat onto his worn carpet, and looked more lost than he'd ever seen her. Not lost like she didn't know where she was lost, like she'd finally admitted she'd been wandering for years without a destination. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom, one of the threadbare ones he'd kept after the breakup, because replacing towels felt like an extravagance. When he handed it to her, their fingers brushed. She flinched like the touch burned. "I'll get you something dry to wear." "Marcus, you're shivering. We can talk after you're not hypothermic." He rummaged through his dresser, emerging with an old Georgetown hoodie and sweatpants that would be comically oversized on her frame. Tori took them without a word and disappeared into his bathroom. Marcus used the moment alone to steady himself. His heart was hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. 5 days of building walls, of convincing himself that walking away was the right choice, and Tori had demolished all of it by showing up in the rain. When she emerged makeup-free and swimming in his clothes, she looked nothing like the CEO who commanded respect with a glance. She looked young and uncertain, and so beautiful it made Marcus's teeth ache. They sat on the couch, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt charged. Tori held the manila envelope in her lap, fingers whirring at the edge. I created a position for you. Director of Employee Wellness. It's all in here: job description, salary, benefits. Her words came faster, like she was afraid of losing momentum. Remote work, flexible hours, leading a company-wide initiative to create programs that prevent exactly what happened to you from happening to anyone else. It's real work, important work, and I think you'd be incredible at it. Marcus took the envelope on autopilot, too stunned to process. But that's not why I'm here. Tori's voice dropped. I'm here because I've spent 3 days pretending I'm fine. Telling myself that losing you is just business, that I can move on, like I move on from everything. And I can't. She looked at him, then really looked at him, and Marcus saw something he'd never seen before. Victoria Hayes, terrified and unguarded and completely human. I don't want to be your boss anymore. I want... She stopped, laughed bitterly. I don't even know how to say this. I'm good at boardrooms and negotiations and strategic planning. I'm terrible at this. At what? At telling you that you matter to me, not as an employee, as a person, as... She pressed her lips together, visibly fighting for composure. I'm in love with you, Marcus. I have been for months, maybe longer. And I couldn't say anything while you worked for me. Couldn't cross that line. The world tilted sideways. But you don't work for me anymore. So I'm here in the rain, humiliating myself because the thought of you walking out of my life forever is worse than any rejection you could possibly give me. Marcus forgot how to breathe. Victoria Hayes, untouchable, brilliant, terrifying, was confessing feelings he'd convinced himself were impossible. The woman he'd loved in silence for 18 months, the one he'd resigned to escape because staying near her without having her was torture, was telling him she loved him back. Say something, she whispered. Please. Come inside. His voice came out hoarse. You're soaking wet, and we need to just come inside. But she was already inside, already sitting on his couch in his clothes with her heart exposed and waiting for him to either hold it or crush it. Marcus's hands were shaking. I've been in love with you since my first month at Hayes Industrial. It means every late-night call felt like stealing something I wasn't allowed to have. It means I spent Saturday mornings in your garage pretending I was working on a motorcycle when really I was just desperate to be near you. Tori's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the rain. It means part of why I resigned was because staying near you without being able to have you was killing me. I was burning out from the merger, yes, but I was also breaking from wanting something I thought was impossible. Marcus, let me finish. He took a step closer, close enough to see the silver flecks in her blue eyes, close enough to smell rain and expensive perfume and possibility. You showing up here tonight telling me how you feel it's the most terrifying and exhilarating thing that's ever happened to me. But I need you to understand something. Tori's fingers tightened on the envelope. I meant what I wrote in that resignation letter. I was disappearing. The merger was consuming me, and I couldn't see a way out except to leave completely. He gestured around his small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the motorcycle magazines, the life he was trying to rebuild. I'm not the same person I was when I started at your company. I'm not sure who I am right now, and I can't be what you need me to be if I don't figure out who I am first. The words hung between them like a suspended sentence. Marcus watched Tori process them, saw the flicker of pain cross her face before she locked it down with practiced control. I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself. Her voice came out quiet but steady. That's the point. The person you think you need to be, the one who works 90-hour weeks and sacrifices everything for the crew, that's not who I fell in love with. Then who did you fall in love with? The man who lights up talking about vintage motorcycles and road trips he's never taken? The one who sends me book recommendations at midnight and argues about character motivation like it matters? The person who listened when I told you about wanting to be an architect, who didn't judge me for inheriting an empire I never wanted? She took a shaky breath. I fell in love with Marcus Brennan, the human being, not Marcus Brennan, the employee. And I'm standing here because I do not want to lose the human being. Something loosened in Marcus's chest, a knot he'd been carrying for months without naming. I don't want to lose you either, but I'm terrified. Of what? Of this being another thing I fail at, of not being enough, of, he forced himself to say the hardest part, of you realizing I'm not worth the risk. Tori set the envelope down on his coffee table with deliberate care, like she was making a decision. Then she closed the distance between them until they were barely a foot apart, her rain-soaked presence filling his senses. Listen to me very carefully. You are not a failure. You recognized that you were drowning and you made the hardest choice. You saved yourself. That's not weakness. That's survival. It doesn't feel like survival. That's because you've spent your whole life being told that quitting means failure. She reached up, hesitated for half a second, then gently touched his face. Her fingers were cold from the rain, but her touch burned. I'm telling you, it means wisdom. You quit a situation that was destroying you. That takes more courage than staying. Marcus's eyes stung. He'd spent 5 days feeling like a coward, like he'd abandoned ship when the company needed him most, like he'd let Tori down in the worst possible way. But she was looking at him like he'd done something brave instead of broken. I missed you. The admission came out rough. The second I sent that resignation, I missed you. Not the wall. You. I missed you too. Her thumb brushed his cheekbone, a gesture so tender it made his breath catch. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I kept reaching for my phone to call you, then remembering you were gone. I'd see something I wanted to tell you about and realize I couldn't anymore. Her voice broke slightly. I went to the garage on Saturday out of habit. Your motorcycle was just sitting there half finished, and She stopped blinking rapidly. You what? I sat on the floor next to it and cried. The admission came out like a confession, which is insane because I don't cry. I haven't cried in years. But I looked at that triumph and thought about all the Saturdays we'd spent there talking and laughing and building something together. And the idea that those were over broke something in me. Marcus moved on instinct, pulling her close, wrapping his arms around her rain-soaked shoulders. She stiffened for half a second. Victoria Hayes didn't do vulnerability, didn't accept comfort, then melted into him with a sound that might have been relief or surrender or both. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing together, rain drumming against the windows. Marcus could feel her heart pounding against his chest, could feel her trembling slightly, could feel the careful control she'd maintained for years finally cracking apart. I don't know how to do this, she whispered against his shoulder. Relationships, feelings, any of it. I've spent my entire adult life focused on the company. I've had dates, flings, things that look like relationships from the outside but never meant anything. And now I'm here in your apartment telling you things I've never told anyone, and I'm terrified I'm doing it all wrong. Marcus pulled back just enough to see her face. You showed up in the rain to tell me you love me. That's pretty much perfect. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. At it? Yeah. He smiled back, feeling lighter than he had in months. Though next time, maybe check the weather forecast first. Next time, she tested the words like they held weight. Does that mean? It means I love you too. He said it clearly, no hesitation, letting the truth fill the space between them. It means I want to try this, whatever this is, but I need you to understand that I'm not ready to jump back into work. Not yet, maybe not for a while. Tori nodded slowly. The position I created, it's real and the offer stands. But there's no timeline. Take a month, 2 months, however long you need, or don't take it at all. This, she gestured between them, this isn't contingent on employment. You created a whole position for me. I created a position the company needs and you'd be perfect for. But if you never step foot in Hayes Industrial again, I still want this. I still want you. Marcus studied her face, looking for doubt or obligation or the careful diplomacy she deployed in boardrooms. He found none of it, just Tori, stripped of armor, offering him something precious and terrifying. I need time to figure out who I am outside of work, to rest, to finish that motorcycle, and maybe actually take the trip I've been dreaming about for years. Can you give me that? Yes, no hesitation, no negotiation. Take whatever time you need. And I need us to start this right, not as boss and employee, not as CEO and wellness director, or whatever the position is. Just as two people figuring out if this works. What does that look like? Marcus considered. Dates, real ones, coffee shops and movies and terrible restaurant choices. Conversations that aren't at midnight because we're both working. Getting to know each other outside of Hayes Industrial. I'd like that. Tori's smile was small but genuine. Though I should warn you, I'm terrible at dating. My last relationship ended because I canceled 3 dates in a row for board meetings. Lucky for you, I'm unemployed. My schedule is wide open. She laughed, a real sound that lit up her whole face, and Marcus felt something shift into place. This could work. This terrifying, impossible thing might actually work. Outside, the storm was settling into steady rain, the kind that would last all night. Inside Marcus's small apartment, with mismatched furniture and motorcycle magazines, and a life waiting to be rebuilt, two people who'd spent months loving each other in secret finally stopped pretending they didn't. Tori reached up and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, like she was asking permission. Marcus answered by pulling her closer, by threading his fingers through her damp hair, by kissing her back, with 18 months of wanting compressed into this single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tori's eyes were bright. I should probably go. Let you rest. We can figure out the details tomorrow. Stay. The word came out before Marcus could think better of it. Not like that, just stay. We can talk or watch something or just exist in the same space without it being about work or crisis or anything except being together. She searched his face. You're sure? I'm sure. They ended up on his couch with a blanket and a movie neither of them watched, content to simply be. Tori curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, both of them learning the geography of being close without the pressure of what came next. Halfway through the film, Marcus felt her relax completely, her breathing evening out. He looked down to find her asleep, defenses finally down, trusting him enough to let go. He stayed awake watching her, this woman who commanded boardrooms and closed deals and moved through the world with absolute certainty, now vulnerable and peaceful in his arms. Tomorrow would bring questions and logistics and the complex reality of building something real. But tonight, in this small apartment, with rain falling and a future unwritten, Marcus Brennan held Victoria Hayes and felt for the first time in months like he was exactly where he needed to be. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the disorienting sensation that something fundamental had changed while he slept. His phone showed 8:32, which meant he'd slept later than he had in years. The apartment held that particular Saturday morning quiet where the world felt paused, giving him space to breathe. Then he remembered. Tori, the rain, the confession. He found a note on his kitchen counter, her handwriting precise even on a scrap of paper torn from one of his motorcycle magazines. Had to go home and change. Breakfast. That diner on 5th Street you mentioned once. 9 a.m. Tea. Marcus texted back immediately, his fingers clumsy with something that felt dangerously close to joy. I'll be there. Her response came before he'd finished his first cup of coffee. Don't be late. I have a reputation for punctuality to maintain. He arrived at the 5th Street diner at 8:55, which felt like a minor miracle, given that he'd spent 20 minutes standing in front of his closet trying to decide what you wore to breakfast with the woman who just upended your entire existence. He'd settled on jeans and a button-down that didn't scream unemployed and desperate, though that's exactly what he was on paper. The diner was exactly as he'd described it during one of those late-night calls months ago. Vinyl booths, checkerboard floors, waitresses who called everyone hun in the smell of bacon grease that had probably been soaking into the walls since the 70s. The kind of place where the coffee was terrible and the pancakes were transcendent. Tori walked in at 9:02 wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual armor of tailored suits. No makeup except a touch of lip gloss. Hair down instead of the severe bun she wore to board meetings. She looked younger like this, more approachable, though her posture still carried that unconscious authority that came from years of commanding rooms. She slid into the booth across from him, and Marcus watched her scan the diner with the same analytical intensity she probably brought to quarterly reports. Assessing, categorizing, finding the patterns. I was sitting in my car again. Her lips quirked, panicking. But you came in anyway. I did. A waitress materialized with coffee, actually terrible as promised, and menus laminated to the point of being sticky. They ordered without much discussion, pancakes for Tori, and omelet for Marcus, because making decisions about food together felt like its own kind of intimacy. Tori wrapped both hands around her coffee mug like she was trying to absorb its warmth. I haven't been on a real date in 4 years. Define real. One where I actually cared what the other person thought of me. She met his eyes. One where I wasn't just going through the motions because my assistant thought I needed to maintain a social presence. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. For what it's worth, I'm completely out of practice too, and unemployed, and probably the worst dating prospect you could find in a 50-mile radius. Lucky for you, I'm not looking for prospects. I'm looking for you. The words landed with unexpected weight. Marcus had spent 18 months convincing himself that what he felt for Tori was one-sided, that her kindness was just good management, that those late-night conversations were simply her way of filling lonely hours. Having her look at him now with clear intention, with want, written plainly across her face felt like standing too close to the sun. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and Marcus watched the micro-expressions flicker across her face, recognition, calculation, the instinctive urge to respond. Emergency board meeting. She picked up the phone, fingers hovering over the screen. They want me there in an hour. The old Tory would have been halfway out the door already, apologizing over her shoulder while mentally cataloging which executives she needed to call during the drive. Marcus waited to see which version would show up now. Tory typed out a message slowly, deliberately, then set the phone face down on the table and turned it off completely. I told them I'm unavailable until this afternoon. Her voice carried something between defiance and terror. They can handle it without me for a few hours. Marcus's throat went tight. That's huge. It's terrifying. She smiled, but it wobbled at the edges. But so is everything else about this, and I'm doing it anyway. And their food arrived, and they ate slowly, talking about everything except Hayes Industrial. Books they wanted to read, places they'd never been, the documentary Tori had watched about architectural failures buildings that collapsed because someone ignored the math in favor of aesthetics. That's the thing about architecture, she said, stealing a bite of his omelet without asking. You can't lie to physics. If the structure isn't sound, eventually it falls. No amount of beautiful facade can save it. Marcus thought about the structure they were trying to build together, all the ways it could collapse under the weight of history and power imbalance, and the fundamental question of whether two people from such different worlds could make something sustainable. What are you thinking about? Tori's fork paused halfway to her mouth, wondering if we're ignoring the math. She considered this seriously the way she considered everything. Maybe, but sometimes you have to build first and calculate later. See if the foundation holds under real stress. That's not very CEO of you. Good. She reached across the table, took his hand. I'm tired of being CEO all the time. They left the diner an hour later and stood on the sidewalk in weak October sunlight, neither quite ready to separate. Marcus's hands found his pockets to keep from reaching for her. Tori studied him with that analytical intensity that should have felt invasive but instead felt like being seen. What are you doing tomorrow? Her breath came out in small clouds. Nothing planned. Why? The motorcycle. Your garage time. I thought maybe if you want we could work on it together. Like we used to. Marcus's heart kicked. I'd love that. 10 a.m. I'll bring coffee. She stepped closer, kissed him briefly, tasting like maple syrup and possibility. See you tomorrow, Marcus. He watched her walk to her BMW, sleek and expensive and so perfectly Tory, and drive away. Then he stood on that sidewalk for 5 more minutes, grinning like an idiot, feeling the first real joy he'd experienced in months settle into his bones like warmth. Weeks 1 through 8, Saturday mornings regained their sacred status, though the context had shifted. Marcus still showed up at 10 with 2 coffees, still spent hours with his hands buried in the Triumph's engine. But now Tori would lean against the workbench and watch him with open affection instead of careful distance, would hand him tools and let their fingers linger, would laugh at his stories about college without the professional filter that used to keep them safely separated. On their 3rd Saturday, Marcus looked up from adjusting the carburetor to find her sketching on a pad she'd pulled from somewhere. What are you drawing? Tori turned the pad around. A building all clean lines and unexpected angles with windows positioned to capture light in ways that suggested movement. It's nothing, just I used to do this before. It's beautiful. Marcus wiped grease from his hands, moved closer. Show me more. She flipped through pages of architectural drawings, each one more ambitious than the last. Community centers and libraries and houses that looked like they were designed for actual humans instead of magazine spreads. Work she'd been doing in secret, he realized, storing up dreams she thought she'd never be allowed to chase. You should take classes. He said it without thinking, then watched her face close slightly. I'm serious. You're good at this, Tori. Really good. I run a $420 million company. I don't have time for classes. You found time for me. That stopped her. She looked at her drawings, then at Marcus, then out at the driveway where her BMW sat next to his beat-up Honda, the visible representation of the gap between their lives. Maybe, she said slowly, I need to stop using the company as an excuse for not doing things that scare me. During the week, they went on actual dates, coffee shops where they argued about books, a theater showing old films where Tori fell asleep on his shoulder during the second act, and he spent the rest of the movie watching her breathe. A bookstore where she bought him 3 novels about people who ran away from their lives and found themselves on the road. Subtle, Marcus said, looking at the titles. I'm not known for subtlety. She paid for the books over his protests. Consider it research for when you finish yours. Marcus had started writing again, 2,000 words a week, the story flowing easier now that he wasn't trying to squeeze creativity into the gaps between exhaustion. The novel had changed. It wasn't about escape anymore, but about what you found when you stopped running. Tori started therapy. She mentioned it casually one Wednesday over takeout Thai food at her place like it was nothing. But Marcus heard the weight behind it, understood what it meant for someone who'd spent a lifetime solving problems through sheer force of will to admit she needed help. How was it? Excruciating. She picked at her pad thai without eating. She asked me to describe my childhood, and I spent 45 minutes narrating events without accessing feelings. She said I was very good at reporting, but terrible at experiencing. That sounds about right. Tori threw a spring roll at him. He caught it, ate it, and watched relief flood her face when she realized he wasn't going to push. Week 4 brought physical intimacy, tentative and awkward and perfect. They'd been watching the movie at his apartment, something forgettable that neither of them cared about, when the space between them on the couch became unbearable. Marcus kissed her, and she kissed back, and somehow they ended up in his bedroom with the lights off and uncertainty replaced by want. Afterward, Tori lay with her head on his chest, fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. I'm not good at this. Her voice came out small. You're doing fine. I mean relationships, being vulnerable, any of it. She propped herself up on one elbow. I'm going to mess this up. Pull away when you need me close. Work too much. Forget to call. All the things that ended every other relationship I've attempted. Marcus tucked her hair behind her ear. Then we'll fix it when it happens. Together. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but maybe it doesn't have to be complicated either. They set boundaries because Tori needed structure the way Marcus needed space. No work talk after 8 p.m. Dedicated date nights every Wednesday and Saturday. Permission to ask for alone time without it being rejection. The framework of what they were building erected one careful conversation at a time. Week 7 brought their first real conflict, small but instructive. Tori canceled their Wednesday date for a board crisis, something about the tri-state integration hitting unexpected snags, and Marcus spent the evening alone feeling echoes of Jessica's complaints about being second place. He texted Tori at 10 p.m. Hey, I know work stuff happens, but I need to know that we're not falling into old patterns. Her response took 20 minutes. You're right, I'm sorry. This won't be a habit. I promise to be better about protecting our time. The next day, she showed up at his apartment with flowers and an actual apology. They talked about expectations and fears and the fine line between being understanding and being taken for granted. It wasn't easy, but they came out the other side intact. Week 8, Marcus took her to meet Jack Mercer. The bar was a dive on the east side where welders and machinists gathered after shifts to complain about management and life in general. Jack sat in his usual corner booth, suspicious from the moment Marcus and Tori walked through the door. So this is the boss. Jack didn't stand, didn't offer his hand, just looked at Tori like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Former boss. Tori slid into the booth across from him, not flinching under his assessment. I'm just Tori here. Right, just Tori who runs a $500 million company and probably makes more in a week than I do in a year. Marcus tensed, but Tori met Jack's hostility with something like respect. You're not wrong. I do make obscene money. And I got it by inheriting a company built on the backs of people like you, people with actual skills, instead of just good luck in the birth lottery. She leaned forward. I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't trust me either if I were you. But I love Marcus, and he says you're important to him, which makes you important to me. So I'm here because I want to understand who he was before I knew him. Jack studied her for a long moment, then cracked the smallest smile. You got guts, I'll give you that. The evening got easier after that. Jack told stories about Marcus from the early days at Hayes, back when he'd still spent time on the factory floor learning how things actually got made. Tori listened with genuine interest, asking questions that proved she understood the technical details. By the third round of beers, Jack was almost friendly. Walking to the car later, Marcus took Tori's hand. Thank you for that. For what, getting interrogated by your friend? For caring enough to show up, for letting him be hostile without getting defensive, for understanding why it mattered. Tori squeezed his fingers. People like Jack built the company my grandfather claimed credit for. The least I can do is treat him with respect. December, meeting Walter's Thanksgiving, gave Marcus an excuse to delay the inevitable. But by early December, he couldn't put off the conversation any longer. He drove to his father's house in southern Ohio with his stomach in knots and Tori's voice on speakerphone providing moral support. You don't have to do this today. She sounded worried. You could wait until Christmas. Waiting won't make it easier. Marcus watched bare trees blur past his window, the landscape stripped down to bones. He's going to find out eventually. Better it comes from me. Walter Brennan's house sat on 3 acres outside Columbus, close enough to the city for convenience, but far enough out that you could still see stars at night. The workshop behind the main house was where Marcus had learned to weld his father's hands, guiding his through those first clumsy attempts at joining metal. Walter met him at the door with the kind of hug that said he'd been worried even if he'd never admitted out loud. You look better. His father held him at arm's length, examining. When you quit, I thought, well, you look better now. They settled in the living room with beers, the space still carrying traces of Marcus's mother even 5 years after her death. Photos on the mantle. The Afghan she'd crocheted draped over the couch. The particular quality of absence that never quite faded. So, Walter took a long pull from his bottle. You finding work? Not yet. Taking time to figure out what I want. What you want? His father's tone suggested this was a luxury he'd never considered. Must be nice. Marcus felt the familiar friction building the generational divide that came from Walter spending 35 years doing work he hated because it paid the bills while Marcus had the privilege of choosing. I'm seeing someone. The words came out rushed like ripping off a bandage. It's serious. Walter's face softened. That's good, son. After Jessica, I worried. What's her name? Victoria. Tori. Marcus's hands tightened on his beer bottle. She runs Hayes Industrial. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Walter set down his beer with exaggerated care. Your boss. Former boss, I don't work there anymore. Is that why you quit to date her? No, I quit because I was burning out. The relationship happened after. Walter stood up cross to the window overlooking his workshop. His shoulders were rigid, that particular kind of anger that came from feeling betrayed. 35 years I worked for people like her. People who owned the factory where I sweated and bled and broke my body. You know what I learned in 35 years, Marcus? Dad, they don't see us as human. We're tools, resources, things they use up and throw away when we stop being profitable. He turned around. Your mother, when she got sick, you know how much time my boss gave me, 2 days. 2 days to watch my wife die because production schedules don't stop for grief. Marcus's throat went tight. He'd been 15 when his mother died, old enough to remember his father's face when he came home from the factory the day after the funeral, hollow-eyed and broken. And now you're dating one of them, the CEO who worked you until you collapsed, who took everything you had to give and then let you walk away when you had nothing left. It wasn't like that, but even as Marcus said it, he wondered. Hadn't Tori pushed him to the breaking point? Hadn't she accepted his resignation with clinical professionalism while he was drowning? No, Walter's voice rose. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm standing, you gave that woman 3.5 years of your life, sacrificed your health, your relationships, everything. And now she gets to keep you too, gets to play at being in love with the help. Don't call me that. Why not? That's what you are to that's what we all are to people like that. The help. Marcus stood, anger flaring hot in his chest. You don't know her. Don't know anything about what we have. I know she's rich and powerful and you're not. I know those relationships will always end the same way with people like us getting hurt because we were stupid enough to think we mattered. She loves me. She thinks she does. Walter's face held something like pity. But wait until someone better comes along. Someone from her world. Someone who fits. Marcus grabbed his coat. I came here hoping you'd be happy for me. Hoping you'd trust that I'm smart enough to make my own choices. Your grandfather made his own choices too. Trusted the boss who promised him a promotion if he just worked a little harder. Died at 52 with nothing to show for it but a broken back and broken promises. Walter's voice cracked. I don't want that for you, son. I don't want you to learn the hard way that their world isn't for people like us. Marcus walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. Mom wouldn't have wanted you to be this bitter. Your mother never met Victoria Hayes. The drive back to Richmond took 4 hours, and Marcus spent all of them replaying the conversation, Walter's words burrowing under his skin like splinters. He knew his father was wrong, knew Tori loved him for real, not as some kind of class tourism. But doubt had a way of taking root in fertile soil, and his father's anger had fertilized ground Marcus thought he'd already cleared. March. The job hunt. By March, Marcus's savings were getting thin enough to cause anxiety. He'd been unemployed for 5 months, and while Tori had carefully never mentioned money, Marcus felt the weight of it every time she paid for dinner or suggested activities that came with 3-figure price tags. He started browsing job listings, not seriously at first, just testing the waters. Operations director positions at companies across Virginia. Management roles that looked eerily similar to what he'd been doing at Hayes. The cycle waiting to repeat itself. Tori found him on her couch one Wednesday evening with his laptop open to a job board, and her face went carefully blank. You're looking for work. Just browsing. You don't need to job hunt. My offer still stands. Marcus closed his laptop. I need to see what else is out there. Make sure I'm choosing your position because I want it, not because it's convenient. Convenient. Her voice went flat, that CEO tone he hadn't heard in weeks. Is that what you think this is? I think your motives are complicated, so are mine. He stood, needing space to think. I need to know I'm not taking the bomb just to be near you. Tori stood too, pacing to the window, with that caged energy he recognized from board meetings. You want honesty, fine. Yes, I created the position partly to keep you close. The thought of you taking a job somewhere across the country made me physically ill. Is that what you wanted to hear? Actually, yes. Marcus moved toward her. Because that's real. That's you admitting you want me around, which is different from hiding behind corporate justification. I wasn't hiding. She stopped, laughed bitterly. God, you're right. I was totally hiding, presenting it as pure business when really I was terrified you'd leave. I'm not leaving, but I need to make career choices that aren't primarily about us. Can you understand that? Her jaw worked, emotions flickering across her face too fast to catalog. Fear, anger, something that looked like hurt. She was fighting for control. Marcus realized trying to manage this situation the way she managed everything else, by finding the levers, the pressure points, the negotiating position that would get her what she wanted. I understand it intellectually, her hands fisted at her sides. Emotionally, I hate it. I want to solve this by making you the perfect offer you can't refuse, by controlling the outcome, by... She cut herself off. That's not fair to you, and it's not healthy for me. Marcus closed the distance between them, took her hands. What if we made a deal? You practice letting go of control. I practice taking creative risks. We hold each other accountable. What kind of risks? I finished the novel. You take that architecture class you keep not signing up for. We both do the scary thing we've been avoiding. Tori looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. What if I fail? What if I'm terrible at architecture and everyone laughs? Then you'll be terrible and they'll laugh, and you'll survive it. He squeezed her fingers. Better to try and fail than spend your whole life wondering. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she pulled out her phone and opened a browser. What are you doing? Signing up for an intro to architectural design course. Online twice a week. One. Her fingers moved across the screen. Before I lose my nerve. Marcus felt something warm expand in his chest. I'm proud of you. Ask me again in a week when I'm panicking about homework. But she was smiling, that genuine expression that made her whole face light up. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus interviewed at 3 companies. One offered him a position that paid well but felt like stepping back into the same trap. Another wanted someone with more experience in their specific industry. The third ghosted him after the second round. The wellness position at Hayes Industrial, by contrast, felt right in a way Marcus couldn't quite articulate. Not because Tori had created it, but because the work mattered. Preventing what had happened to him from happening to other people. Building systems that treated employees as humans instead of resources. Making the kind of structural changes that could actually improve lives. He spent a week thinking about it, writing out pros and cons, talking it through with Jack over beers. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon in late March, he called Tori. I want to take the position. Silence on the other end. Then her voice, careful and controlled. Are you sure this isn't because of us? It's partly because of us, but mostly because I believe in the work. Marcus sat on his apartment floor, back against the couch. I need you to understand something, though. If I take this job, I'm taking it because the company needs it and I can do it well. Not to be near you. I know. That means I'm going to push back when I think policies are wrong. Challenge the culture you've built even when it's uncomfortable. Be an employee who cares more about people than productivity. I'm counting on it. Her voice softened. I need that. Hayes Industrial needs that. Can you handle me disagreeing with you at work? Honestly, I don't know. I've never tried to separate professional and personal before. She took an audible breath. But I want to try. We'll set boundaries. You'll report to David Sullivan, not me. We don't discuss the relationship at the office. We keep business and personal as separate as possible. Marcus felt the decision settle into certainty. I'll need until January to start. 2 more months to finish recovering. Is that okay? Take whatever time you need. Relief flooded her voice. Thank you for choosing this. For choosing us. They spent the rest of the day planning not the job, but the months between now and January. Tori wanted to use some accumulated vacation time, 5 years' worth, that she'd never touched. Marcus wanted to finish the Triumph restoration, maybe take a test ride. They talked about a long weekend somewhere, just the 2 of them, no work and no obligations. By evening, they'd booked a bed and breakfast in Vermont for early November, a place specializing in architectural tours that made Tori's eyes light up when she found it online. Marcus watched her research the area with the intensity she usually reserved for quarterly projections and felt grateful for every painful step that had brought them to this moment. November, the solo trip. The Triumph roared to life on a cold Saturday morning in mid-November, the engine's rumble echoing through Tori's garage like a victory song. Marcus sat astride the vintage motorcycle he'd spent 14 months restoring, feeling 3 years of work and healing vibrate beneath him. New gaskets, synchronized carburetors, fresh paint on the fuel tank in deep British racing green. Chrome polished until it caught light like water. Tori stood in the garage doorway with coffee, watching him with a smile that made his chest ache. How does it feel? Marcus killed the ignition, letting sudden silence emphasize the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. Like I actually finished something for myself instead of abandoning it halfway through. We finished it. She walked over, handed him his coffee. I may have just handed you tools, but I was here. You were more than here. Marcus climbed off the bike, pulled off his gloves. This doesn't happen without you. The space, the time, the Saturday mornings where you pretended you needed to organize boxes you'd already organized 6 times. Tori laughed caught. I wasn't that obvious. You were completely obvious. It was perfect. They stood in the garage with 14 months of Saturdays behind them and whatever came next stretching forward like an open road. Marcus had been thinking about that road for weeks now, the trip he'd dreamed about since college, the one he'd written into his novel and never taken in real life. I want to make that trip. The words came out easier than he'd expected. Not cross-country, not yet, but a week. Me and the bike and some highways I've never seen. Tori's face did something complicated, an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. When per? Next week if the weather holds, before I started Hayes in January. He set down his coffee, took her hands. I know it's last minute. You should go. She said it firmly, but her grip tightened. Clear your head, take the freedom you've been dreaming about. Will you be okay with that? The question hung between them, heavier than it should have been. They'd been together for 13 months now, navigated conflicts and boundaries in the slow work of building trust. But Marcus saw something flicker in Tori's eyes that looked like fear. Of course I'll be okay. She pulled one hand free to brush hair from her face. It's a week. I'll survive. Tori, he ducked his head to catch her gaze. Real talk. No brave face with buzz. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the CEO mask cracking to reveal the woman underneath. My grandfather took a trip once, said he needed space after a difficult quarter. He was gone for 3 weeks, and when he came back, she trailed off looking at the Triumph instead of Marcus. He was different, distant, like the space had shown him he didn't actually need us as much as he thought. Marcus's heart contracted. I'm not your grandfather. I know that intellectually. Her voice went small. But there's this part of my brain that says if you get away from me, from my chaos and baggage, you'll realize you're better off alone. He pulled her close, felt her resistance melt into his chest. Do you trust me? Yes. Then trust this. I'm taking a week to ride and think and prove to myself I can be okay independently before tying my professional life back to yours. That's healthy. That's me doing the work. He pulled back enough to see her face, but I'm coming back to you. That's not negotiable. Tori's eyes were bright. Promise. I promise, I'll. He kissed her forehead. And to prove it, let's plan something for when I get back. Something concrete you can look forward to instead of spiraling about abandonment. Like what? That Vermont trip, the architectural tour, the bed and breakfast with the obscenely expensive coffee you researched. He smiled. Book it for the day after I return. Give yourself something to hold on to. She pulled out her phone immediately, fingers flying across the screen with the focused energy of someone who needed concrete plans the way other people needed air. By the time Marcus finished his coffee, she'd booked 4 days in a restored farmhouse with mountain views and a full itinerary of buildings to examine. Done, she showed him the confirmation. You come back Friday, we leave Saturday morning. Perfect. Marcus left Tuesday morning with a small pack of essentials and a route that was more suggestion than plan. He'd decided to head south through the Blue Ridge Mountains, following back roads and small highways, staying wherever looked interesting when he got tired. Living the cliché he'd written into his novel and never had the courage to attempt. The first day was pure joy. Cold air rushing past the Triumph humming beneath him, landscape unfolding like a gift he had forgotten to open. He stopped at roadside overlooks to watch valleys fill with autumn light, ate lunch at a diner where the waitress asked about his bike and ended up telling him about her late husband who'd ridden Harleys, called Tori that evening from a cheap motel outside Roanoke. How's it going? Her voice came through eager, like she'd been waiting by the phone. It's perfect. The bike's running great, the weather held, and I just saw a sunset that would make you want to design a building around it. Send me a picture. He did, and she responded with a photo of her dinner takeout Thai from their favorite place, eaten alone at her massive dining table. The image made his chest ache in a good way, this evidence that she was thinking of him, missing him, building a life that included space for his absence. They talked for 20 minutes about nothing important before Marcus had to go. But knowing she was there, that he could call and she'd answer, made the solitude feel chosen instead of lonely. The second day brought rain around noon. Marcus stopped at a small-town library to wait it out, the kind of place with ancient card catalogs and that particular smell of old paper and community. He opened his laptop and wrote for 3 hours, the novel flowing easier than it had in months. 2,000 words about a man learning that freedom didn't mean running from something, but running toward yourself. Day 3, the Triumph's clutch cable started slipping. Marcus limped into a tiny town with one motorcycle shop run by a grizzled mechanic who looked like he'd been fixing bikes since before Marcus was born. Cable stretching. I can adjust it, but you'll need a replacement soon. Can you do it now? Parts won't be here until tomorrow morning. You're welcome to wait in town, or I can ship it wherever you're headed. Marcus considered. He could push on end the trip early, get home to Tori tonight instead of Friday. The temptation was real. He missed her with an ache that felt physical. Wanted to hear her voice without the static of phone connection. Wanted to be in the same room watching her face when she talked about buildings. But that felt like running, like cutting the trip short because independence got uncomfortable, because he missed her too much, because being alone was harder than being partnered. I'll wait. The words came out firm. Adjust what you can today. Replace the cable tomorrow. The mechanic nodded approval. Good choice. Bike like this, you don't rush. Marcus spent the afternoon exploring the town population, maybe 3,000, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers got curious looks. He found a coffee shop and wrote another 2,000 words, the story taking shape in ways that surprised him. The protagonist wasn't running from anything specific anymore. He was running toward himself, toward the person he'd been before obligations and expectations had buried him. That evening, Sir Marcus called Tori. Her voice came through, strained, like she was working hard to sound casual. Cable problems? Are you okay? I'm fine. Stuck in a small town until tomorrow, but I'm using the time well. You could come home early. She said it too quickly. If you wanted to, I wouldn't mind. Marcus heard the hope underneath the fear she was trying to hide. I know, but I think I need to finish this, see it through. Silence stretched long enough that he checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Tori, I'm here. Her voice came out thick. You're right. You should finish. I'm struggling more than I thought I would. His heart twisted. Tell me. I've called my therapist twice this week. Keep having these moments where I'm convinced you're not coming back, that you'll realize the road is better than being with someone who can't let go of control for 5 minutes. She laughed wetly. It's irrational, and I know it's irrational, but knowing doesn't make it stop. What do you do when you have those moments? Go to the garage, sit with your tools, remind myself that you left them here because you're coming back. Another pause. Is that pathetic? It's not pathetic, it's healing. Marcus found himself smiling despite the ache. You're learning to sit with uncertainty instead of controlling it. That's huge progress. It feels terrible. Most growth does. He found a bench outside the coffee shop, watched small-town life happen around him. For what it's worth, I think about you constantly. Every beautiful view, every good meal, every word I write. My first thought is wanting to share it with you. You're not something I'm running from, Tori. You're what I'm learning to run toward. He heard her breath catch, then steady. When do you come home? 2 more days. Then I'm all yours for a long weekend in Vermont. I booked the cutest place. It's probably too romantic and definitely too expensive, but I don't care. They talked for another hour, Marcus describing the small town and the mechanic who looked like he'd seen every mistake a writer could make. Tori describing her week at work, the way David Sullivan was stepping up to handle more decisions, the architecture class where she just submitted her first design project. How'd it go? I have no idea, she laughed. Probably terrible, but I did it, which is what matters. Marcus felt proud enough to burst. You're incredible. Ask me again when I get my grade. The Triumph was ready by 10 the next morning, clutch cable replaced and tested. Marcus paid the mechanic, thanked him for the lesson in patience, and headed north toward home. He could have stretched the trip, found excuses to stay out another few days, but he was ready now. Ready to return to Tori with his independence intact, his novel closer to finished, his sense of self restored enough that he could tie his professional life to hers without losing himself in the process. He rolled into Richmond Friday evening, just as the sun was setting, pulled into his apartment complex, and found Tori waiting outside his door with a bottle of wine and a smile that made 14 months of Saturday mornings feel like prologue to this moment. You came back. She said it like she'd been holding her breath. I promised. Marcus climbed off the bike, pulled off his helmet. Did you doubt me? Every minute. But she was smiling, moving toward him, and also not at all. They went inside and didn't leave his apartment for the rest of the night, making up for 5 days of distance with conversation and contact, and the settled certainty that what they'd built could survive space. That missing each other wasn't weakness, but proof of connection worth protecting. Saturday morning, they drove to Vermont, and Marcus watched Tori light up discussing load-bearing walls and the mathematical poetry of arches. Watched her geek out over a 150-year-old church that had been converted into a community center without losing its essential character. Watched her be fully herself, brilliant and passionate and alive, and felt grateful for every painful choice that had brought them to this moment. January 2027. Return to Hayes. Marcus's first day back at Hayes Industrial started with resistance, though he'd been naive enough to hope for welcome. He arrived at 7, not early enough to seem desperate, but early enough to claim his new office before the building filled with people who remembered him as operations director and now had to reconcile that image with director of employee wellness. The office sat on the third floor, deliberately distant from Tori's executive suite, a small space with a window overlooking the manufacturing floor where third shift was just ending and workers clocked out after 8 hours of making steel into something useful. Someone had left a potted plant on his desk. He found the note underneath. Make them uncomfortable. That's the job. Marcus smiled, tucked the note in his drawer, and spent the first hour reviewing employee data he had requested weeks ago. Turnover rates, sick day usage, exit interview summaries, anonymous survey results about workplace satisfaction. The numbers painted a picture he'd lived but hadn't fully grasped from the inside. Hayes Industrial was systematically burning through talented people, losing institutional knowledge and innovation to exhaustion, masquerading as dedication. The company Tori had built was successful by every financial metric and catastrophic by every human one. At 9, Marcus had his first meeting with the executive team. He'd prepared a 30-minute presentation outlining his assessment and proposed interventions. Mandatory time off, hard stops on email after 7 p.m., restructured performance metrics that didn't reward overwork. Everything Gordon Fletcher would hate. The boardroom felt different from this side of the table. Marcus had sat through hundreds of meetings here as operations director, usually agreeing with whatever Tori proposed because he trusted her judgment and understood the business case. Now he was the one proposing change, the one challenging assumptions, the one about to make executives uncomfortable. Tori sat at the head of the table in full CEO mode, charcoal suit hair, pinned severely, expression giving away nothing. She gave Marcus a brief nod of acknowledgement, but no special recognition. Good. They'd agreed to keep personal and professional rigidly separated. Marcus started with data showing them turnover costs, productivity losses from burnout, the correlation between employee well-being and innovation metrics. Then he hit them with personal stories pulled from exit interviews, talented employees leaving because they'd missed too many of their kids' bedtimes, because their marriages were failing, because they'd developed stress-related health issues and the company insurance barely covered therapy. This isn't sustainable. We're treating people as renewable resources when they're not, and the cost, financial, ethical, reputational, is becoming untenable. Helen Morrison spoke first. Your proposed interventions would reduce available work hours by approximately 15%. How do we maintain output? We hire more people. Stop expecting 60-hour productivity from 40-hour positions. Build systems that work instead of relying on human burnout to bridge the gap. That's a significant cost increase. Less than our current turnover costs. Marcus pulled up his analysis. We're spending millions recruiting and training replacements for people we're driving away. Retention is cheaper than replacement. David Sullivan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. With respect, Marcus, you burned out because the merger pushed you beyond normal capacity. That was an exceptional circumstance, not daily reality. Marcus had expected this. He pulled up another slide showing aggregate hours worked across departments over the past 2 years. These numbers suggest otherwise. The merger was extreme, yes, but the culture that created my burnout exists company-wide. We reward people who sacrifice everything, and we're surprised when they have nothing left. We reward people who deliver results. David's tone carried an edge. That's how business works. It's how our business currently works. I'm proposing we change that. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Marcus could feel the resistance, executives exchanging glances that said this idealistic newcomer didn't understand reality. But he'd known this would be hard. Change always was, especially when you were asking people to question their fundamental assumptions about success. Then a new voice entered the conversation. Gordon Fletcher, attending remotely from the board, his video feed showing him in what looked like a home office with dark wood paneling and visible contempt. This touchy-feely nonsense will destroy productivity. Coddling employees doesn't build great companies. It builds entitled workforces that expect rewards without effort. Marcus met Gordon's eyes through the screen. I'm not proposing we coddle anyone. I'm proposing we treat them as humans. There's a difference, petit même. Not from where I'm sitting. You're teaching people they don't have to sacrifice for success. That's a dangerous lie. The lie is that success requires sacrificing humanity. Gordon's face flushed. You'll regret this approach. Mark my words. Tori spoke for the first time, her voice carrying that CEO authority that made everyone straighten slightly. Marcus's recommendations align with research across multiple industries. Companies that prioritize employee well-being see measurable improvements in productivity, innovation, and profitability. This isn't charity, it's strategic investment. Helen looked surprised. You're backing this? Yes. I created this position because I recognized we were failing our people. Marcus's job is to show us how to do better even when it's uncomfortable. Tori met Marcus's eyes briefly. I expect all of you to seriously consider these proposals. We'll reconvene next week with feedback and questions. The meeting ended with polite tension, executives filing out with Marcus's proposals and various expressions of skepticism. When the room cleared, only he and Tori remained, maintaining professional distance, even though every cell in Marcus's body wanted to cross that space. That was brutal. He stayed on his side of the table. You held your ground. I'm proud of you. Gordon's going to be a problem. Gordon's always a problem. She gathered her materials. But the board respects results. Show them your programs work, and they'll come around. Eventually. They left separately, maintaining the boundaries they'd agreed on. But walking to his office, Marcus felt the weight of what he'd taken on. He wasn't just implementing wellness programs. He was challenging the fundamental culture of Hayes Industrial, the assumptions that had made the company successful and made him sick. This was going to be harder than he'd thought, and Gordon Fletcher was absolutely planning something. Gordon Fletcher's sabotage started subtly, the way poison works, small doses that accumulated into something lethal. Marcus noticed it first in budget meetings where Gordon questioned every line item allocated to wellness programs. Then in hallway conversations that stopped when Marcus approached. Whispers at the coffee station about preferential treatment and conflicts of interest. By late February, the programs were showing results. Turnover had dropped 12% in the first quarter. Employee satisfaction scores ticked upward for the first time in 3 years. But Gordon had allies on the board, old guard executives who'd built Hayes Industrial alongside Tori's grandfather, and still believed that comfort bred weakness. Marcus spent his days building infrastructure, mental health days that didn't count against sick leave, mandatory manager training on recognizing burnout, automated systems that flagged employees working excessive hours. The resistance was constant but manageable, until it wasn't. The leak hit the business press on a Wednesday morning in early March. Marcus was reviewing quarterly data when his phone exploded with notifications. An anonymous source had fed a reporter at the Richmond Business Journal a story about Hayes Industrial's CEO being in a relationship with an employee she'd personally hired. The article stopped just short of alleging quid pro quo, but the implication hung there like smoke: nepotism, favoritism, the appearance of impropriety. Hayes Industrial's stock dropped 3% before lunch. Marcus's phone lit up with Tori's name. He answered, already knowing what was coming. My office, now. The executive floor held that particular tension that preceded disasters. Assistants typed with aggressive focus, avoiding eye contact. The conference room where board members gathered via video showed Gordon Fletcher's face on the main screen, looking satisfied in a way that made Marcus's hands curl into fists. Tori stood at her window overlooking the manufacturing floor. She didn't turn when Marcus entered. Gordon leaked it. I know it was him. Marcus closed the door. What do we do? She turned then, and he saw the CEO mask firmly in place, the one that made subordinates straighten and competitors sweat. We have options. You resign temporarily until this blows over. I recuse myself completely from oversight of your department. Or we go public with the timeline, prove the relationship started after you left. None of those feel right. Marcus crossed his arms. This feels like letting Gordon win. Then what do you suggest? Her voice carried an edge. Because the board is convening an emergency meeting tomorrow, and I need to walk in with a plan. The plan is we tell the truth. We started dating after I resigned. We've maintained strict boundaries at work. The programs are working and the data proves it. Gordon doesn't care about data. He wants you gone and me embarrassed. Tori's control was fraying at the edges. This is about power, Marcus. About the old guard reasserting dominance. So we fight. By doing what hoping honesty wins. She laughed bitterly. I've been CEO for 8 years. Honesty is a tool, not a strategy. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was Tori in full CEO mode, calculating angles and leverage instead of standing on principle. He understood it. She'd been trained from childhood to protect the company above everything else. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. You want me to resign? He said it flatly. I want to protect both of us. By throwing me under the bus. By being strategic. Her jaw tightened. You knew this would be complicated. You knew mixing personal and professional would create vulnerabilities. I knew it would be hard. I didn't know you'd fold the first time we got pushback. The words landed like a slap. Tori's face went white, then red. Fold, I'm trying to save your career. My career. Marcus's voice rose. I don't care about my career. I care about doing work that matters. About proving that companies don't have to destroy people to succeed. And you're asking me to run away because Gordon Fletcher doesn't like it. I'm asking you to be practical. No, you're asking me to let you control this situation instead of trusting that we can weather it together. He moved toward her. This is exactly what you do, Tori. When things get messy, you try to manage every variable instead of accepting that some things can't be controlled. Her hands fisted at her sides. Don't make this about my control issues. It is about your control issues. You created a position for me partly because you couldn't stand the idea of me leaving. Now you want me to leave anyway because staying is harder than you thought. That's not fair. None of this is fair. Marcus felt exhaustion dragging at him. But I'm not running again. I did that once and it nearly killed me. I'm staying and doing the work, and if Gordon wants me gone, he'll have to drag me out. Tori turned back to the window. Her shoulders were rigid. That meant she was fighting for composure. When she spoke, her voice came out cold enough to freeze. Then I'll recuse myself. Completely. We become purely professional at work. No acknowledgement of the relationship, no personal contact during business hours. Can you live with that? Can you, Garamo? Marcus shot back. Because that sounds like punishment for refusing to do what you want. It sounds like the only way to protect both our positions. Or maybe it's your way of pulling back because I'm not being controllable enough. She spun around, fury blazing in her eyes. I can't do this right now. The scandal, the board, your stubbornness, I can't manage all of it. Maybe you should stop trying to manage me. Maybe we rushed this. The words came out harsh. Maybe we weren't ready to navigate this level of complexity. Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. You don't mean that. I don't know what I mean. Tori pressed her fingers to her temples. I just know I can't think straight when you're fighting me on the one thing I'm trying to fix. I'm not fighting you. I'm fighting for us. Well, maybe I need you to stop fighting for 5 minutes and let me do what I'm good at. The silence that followed felt like glass breaking. Marcus looked at this woman he loved, saw the fear underneath, the anger, the CEO scrambling for control, because vulnerability terrified her more than any board meeting ever could. He wanted to cross the distance, pull her close, remind her that they were stronger together than apart. But he was tired of being managed instead of trusted, tired of watching her default to control every time emotions ran high. I think I should go. His voice came out flat. Marcus, we both need space to think. Let's take it. He left her office, walked past the assistants, who definitely heard Ray's voices, took the stairs instead of the elevator, because he needed the physical exertion to burn off the adrenaline flooding his system. Outside, March cold bit at his face and he stood in the parking lot trying to remember how to breathe normally. His phone buzzed. A text from Tori. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that about rushing. I don't want space. I want to fix this. Marcus stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I need a few days, please give me that. She didn't respond. For 3 days, Marcus threw himself into work with the kind of focus that would have worried him if he'd been paying attention to his own warning signs. He met with managers about implementing the new policies, ran focus groups with employees about what changes would actually help, built presentations full of data showing that his programs were working, that the company was healthier than it had been in years. And he didn't talk to Tori, didn't answer her calls, responded to work emails with professional brevity, and ignored everything else. On day 3, David Sullivan showed up at Marcus's office after hours. We need to talk. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. David sat looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested this conversation was going to be painful. The board meeting is tomorrow. Gordon's calling for a vote to terminate your position. I figured. There's more. David leaned forward. He's been lobbying board members privately, telling them you and Tori have compromised judgment, that the wellness programs are a waste of resources, that the company was stronger before you came back. Marcus felt something harden in his chest. What's Tori doing about it? Preparing to fight, but she's worried you two aren't speaking, that you're going into this divided. We are divided. She wants me to resign. I won't. David studied him for a long moment. You know she loves you, right? Even when she's being impossible. I know. Marcus's throat went tight. That doesn't make this easier. No, but it means whatever happens tomorrow, you're on the same side. David stood. Don't forget that when Gordon starts twisting the knife. After David left, Marcus sat in his office staring at data that proved his programs worked. Turnover down 23% since implementation. Productivity up 8%. Employee satisfaction at a 5-year high. The numbers were undeniable. But numbers didn't account for politics, for old grudges, for men like Gordon Fletcher who saw change as threat. His phone rang at 8 p.m. Not Tory Jack Mercer. Get to your place now. Something you need to see. Marcus drove home to find his apartment full of people. Jack stood in the kitchen with 3 other machinists from the factory floor. David Sullivan sat on the couch with Helen Morrison. A dozen employees from various departments crowded the living room, faces ranging from determined to angry to quietly resolute. What is this? Jack handed him a folder thick with papers. Statements. 147 employees signed a petition asking the board to keep your programs. Every person here wrote about how your changes helped them. Marcus flipped through pages, each one a story. A single mother who'd used mental health days to deal with her son's diagnosis. A machinist who'd finally felt heard when Marcus's policies stopped rewarding dangerous overtime. A manager who'd learned to recognize burnout in her team and intervene before people broke. Why? His voice came out rough. Helen spoke from the couch. Because you showed us we were wrong. About treating people well being incompatible with business success. About weakness and strength. About what kind of company we want to be. She smiled. Also, the numbers are excellent. Turns out not destroying employees is good for profits. Gordon thinks he can bully you out. Jack crossed his arms. He's wrong. We're going to that board meeting tomorrow, all of us, and we're making it clear that if you go, a lot of us will reconsider whether Hayes is the kind of place we want to work. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the solidarity, the evidence that his work had mattered to real people in tangible ways. He'd been so focused on data and presentations that he'd forgotten the human impact, the lives changed by simple acknowledgement that people deserve to be treated as more than production units. Thank you. It was inadequate, but it was all he had. The group stayed for another hour, strategizing about the board meeting, building a coalition that crossed departmental lines and seniority levels. By the time everyone left, Marcus felt less alone than he had in 3 days. But there was still one conversation he needed to have. He called Tori. She answered on the first ring. Marcus, I'm sorry for shutting you out. I'm sorry for trying to control the outcome instead of trusting us. Her voice carried exhaustion. These 3 days have been I haven't slept. Keep reaching for my phone to call you and stopping myself because you asked for space. I know, I've been doing the same thing. They talked until midnight, not about the board meeting or Gordon's machinations, but about fear and control and the hard work of loving someone while letting them be autonomous. By the time Marcus hung up, they hadn't solved anything, but the distance between them felt smaller, more manageable, survivable. The board meeting convened at 9 a.m. in Hayes Industrial's main conference room. Gordon attended in person this time, sitting at the opposite end of the table from Tori with the satisfied air of someone who'd already won. The other board members occupied the space between them, 6 people who'd determined whether Marcus's work survived or died. Marcus wasn't allowed in the room. Conflict of interest, Gordon had argued, and the board had agreed. Instead, he sat in his office with the door open, watching employees pass by with expressions ranging from supportive to curious to hostile. Not everyone had signed the petition. Not everyone believed in what he was trying to build. In the conference room, Gordon made his case first. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but David had briefed him on the strategy: attack the relationship as inappropriate, paint the wellness programs as expensive coddling, suggest that Marcus had leveraged a personal connection for professional gain. Then Tori stood to counter. Through the glass wall separating the conference room from the hallway, Marcus watched her transform into the CEO who'd built Hayes Industrial into an industry leader. She pulled up data showing the program's success rate from employee testimonials, explained why the relationship didn't constitute a conflict, because Marcus had been unemployed when it started, and reported to David, not her. But Gordon had saved his strongest argument for last. Marcus watched him stand, saw the triumph on his face, and felt his stomach drop before the man even spoke. "You're compromised. In love with him. Can't be objective about his value to this company." Tori didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, placed both hands flat on the conference table, and said something that made Gordon's face flush dark red. Whatever it was, it worked. The board members' expressions shifted from skeptical to thoughtful. Helen Morrison pulled up financial reports on her tablet. David Sullivan added context Marcus couldn't hear, but could see landing with impact. The meeting stretched past noon. Marcus gave up watching and returned to his desk, staring at the employee petition, at the evidence that his work had mattered to real people in concrete ways. Whatever the board decided, that truth remained. He'd helped 147 people feel seen, valued, treated as humans instead of resources. That it wasn't nothing. His office phone rang at 2 p.m. David's voice came through, tight with something that might have been relief. "You need to get up here." Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering against his ribs. The conference room door stood open, board members filing out with expressions he couldn't read. Gordon stormed past without looking at him, fury radiating off him in waves. Inside, Tori stood alone at the windows. She turned when he entered, and her face showed exhaustion and something else: victory tempered by the cost. "We won. Program stay. You stay." Gordon resigned from the board, effective immediately. Marcus felt his knees go weak. "What happened?" "I told them the truth, that you showed me the culture I'd built was destroying people. That yes, I love you, and that makes me more objective about this, not less, because I've seen what burnout looks like up close." She crossed to him. Then David and Helen presented the employee petition in Q1 financial data. "The numbers don't lie, your programs work. We're more productive, more innovative, more stable than we've been in years." And Gordon called for a vote, lost 7-2. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, then threw a tantrum and quit rather than accept being outvoted. Marcus pulled her into his arms, felt her shake slightly against him as the tension finally released. They stood like that for a long moment, both processing how close they'd come to losing everything. "I'm sorry," she spoke into his shoulder, "for trying to control you instead of trusting us, for forgetting that we're stronger together than apart. I'm sorry for being stubborn, for not seeing how scared you were. Can we agree not to have another fight like that?" "Can't promise that." Marcus pulled back to see her face. "But I can promise we'll handle the next one better." They left separately, maintaining professional distance, even though the board already knew about them. But walking to his car that evening, Marcus felt lighter than he had in weeks. The work would continue. The resistance would persist. But they'd survived the first real test, and that mattered. His phone buzzed with a text from Tori. "Dinner at my place. I owe you an apology meal. I'll bring wine. Bring yourself. I have plenty of wine." Marcus drove to her house with a bottle anyway, because showing up empty-handed felt wrong even after everything they'd been through. She answered the door in yoga pants and an old sweatshirt, looking nothing like the CEO who'd just defended his position to the board. Looking like home. They ate pasta she'd attempted to cook, slightly overcooked but edible, and talked about everything except work. The novel Marcus was finally finishing. The architecture class where Tori had gotten an A on her first project. The trip they wanted to take when things settled down. Afterward, they ended up on her couch with wine and comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing someone well enough that words weren't always necessary. Tori curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, fingers tracing idle patterns on his arm. I need to tell you something. Her voice came out quiet. I've been thinking about succession planning. Marcus went still. What? Not tomorrow, not even next year, but in 3 years, maybe 5, I want to transition to chairman and let someone else run daily operations. She sat up to look at him. David's ready, better than ready, and I want to design building space, really design them, not just sketch as a hobby. Are you sure? I'm sure I don't want to be 70 years old and realize I spent my entire life running a company I inherited instead of building a life I chose. Her eyes held his. You showed me that was possible, that letting go of what I thought I had to be could open space for who I actually am. Marcus felt his chest expand with something too large for words. I'm proud of you. Ask me again when I'm panicking about giving up control. I will. He kissed her forehead. Every day if you need me to. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, both thinking about futures they'd been too afraid to want until now. Eventually, Tori fell asleep against him, and Marcus stayed awake watching her breathe, grateful for every difficult conversation and hard choice that had brought them to this moment of peace. The next weeks brought a rhythm that felt sustainable. Marcus's programs expanded company-wide with the board's blessing and Gordon's departure removing the biggest obstacle. Employees who'd been skeptical started using mental health days. Managers attended training and actually learned to recognize warning signs. The culture shifted incrementally, one conversation at a time. In April, Marcus finished his novel. He sent it to 3 literary agents expecting nothing and got 2 requests for full manuscripts within a week. The book wouldn't make him rich. First novels rarely did, but the act of completing something he'd started felt like proof that he'd rebuilt himself into someone who finished things instead of abandoning them halfway through. Tori's architecture class led to more classes, which led to her actually designing a small community center for a nonprofit that needed pro bono work. The building broke ground in June, and Marcus went with her to the ceremony, watched her explain load-bearing walls and natural light to the nonprofit director, saw her light up in ways she never did discussing quarterly reports. May brought reconciliation with Walter, tentative and imperfect, but real. Marcus drove to Ohio with Tori for a Saturday afternoon that started tense and ended with his father showing her his workshop, explaining welding techniques with the kind of patience he usually reserved for teaching grandchildren he didn't have yet. Over burgers at the kitchen table, Walter looked at Tori directly for the first time since they'd arrived. My son tells me you're learning on architecture. Trying to. I'm not very good yet. Being not very good is the first step to being good. Walter took a long pull from his beer. I was a terrible welder when I started. Made joints that cracked wasted metal, nearly burned down my father's shop twice. But I kept at it because it mattered. What made you keep going? Pride in the work. He set down his beer. Not pride like arrogance. Pride like knowing that when I joined 2 pieces of metal, they'd hold under stress. That I'd built something that would last. His eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Tori. My son says you're trying to change how your company treats people. Make it so they don't get used up and thrown away. That's the goal. Then I was wrong about you. Walter's jaw worked like the admission cost him. Took me a while to see it, but Marcus is happier than I've seen him in years. Healthier, more himself. He extended his hand across the table. You're welcome here anytime. Tori shook his hand, blinking rapidly. Thank you. That means more than you know. On the drive back to Richmond, she was quiet, staring out the window at spring, giving way to summer. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. Your father loves you so much it scared me. He has a complicated way of showing it sometimes. No, I mean, she turned to face him. The way he looked at you, the way he worried about whether I'd hurt you, that's what love looks like when it's not buried under 100 layers of obligation and expectation. Her voice went thick. My grandfather never looked at me like that. Never worried whether I was happy, only whether I was useful. Marcus took her hand. You deserve better. I'm learning that. She squeezed his fingers, slowly. By June, they'd moved in together, not into Tori's Victorian mansion that felt like a museum to someone else's life, but into a smaller house they found together. A craftsman bungalow with a two-car garage perfect for the triumph in whatever other projects they decided to take on. A sunroom where Marcus set up his writing desk next to Tori's drafting table, both of them working in parallel on the dreams they'd deferred for too long. The first morning in the new house, Marcus made coffee while Tori unpacked boxes, and the domesticity of it hit him with unexpected force. This was real. They'd built something that had survived doubt and distance and Gordon Fletcher's sabotage. Something that could hold under stress because the foundation was sound. "What are you smiling about?" Tori appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing one of his old t-shirts. "Us. This. Everything." She crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. "It's pretty good, isn't it?" "It's perfect." "Not perfect." She rested her chin on his shoulder. "But it's ours." October brought the anniversary, 1 year since that rain-soaked Friday when Tori had shown up at his door and changed everything. Marcus planned carefully, recruiting Jack for help with logistics and timing. On a Saturday afternoon, he drove Tori to her old Victorian mansion, the one she'd finally sold in August to a young family who'd promised to fill it with noise and life. "Why are we here?" She looked confused as he led her to the garage. "Because this is where we built the first thing together." He opened the door. The space was empty now, the new owners having converted it into a playroom. But Marcus could still see phantom traces of Saturday morning's engine parts spread across workbenches, Tori handing him tools with grease on her hands and laughter in her eyes. "Remember when you offered me this space? I remember thinking I was being subtle about wanting to spend time with you." She smiled. "I was not subtle. You were completely transparent. It was perfect." Marcus pulled a small box from his pocket. "I thought freedom meant being alone. Turns out it means being fully yourself with someone who sees you." He opened the box. The ring was simple vintage design, something that looked like it had history instead of trying to impress with size. "Victoria Hayes, will you marry me?" Her hands flew to her mouth. For a moment, she just stared at the ring, then at him, then back at the ring. When she finally spoke, her voice came out choked. "That's not fair. I had a whole speech planned." Marcus blinked. "You did." She pulled out her own ring box, laughing through tears. "I was going to propose next week. Had it all organized." "You were going to propose to me?" "Obviously. Who else would I marry?" She opened her box, revealing a simple band that matched his taste exactly. "Yes, I'll marry you. Now ask me properly so I can say yes again." They put rings on each other in the empty garage where they'd first admitted wanting something more than professionalism. Both laughing, both crying, both understanding that the life they were building together mattered more than any title or company or inheritance. The Hayes Industrial Holiday Party in December brought confirmation that things had fundamentally shifted. Employees who'd been skeptical of Marcus's programs now stopped him to share success stories. David Sullivan gave a toast about leadership having the courage to evolve. Helen Morrison presented Q4 numbers showing productivity up 15% and turnover down 34%. The company was healthier, the people were healthier, and Marcus had helped make that happen. But the moment that mattered most came when Tori pulled him onto the balcony, away from the party noise, snow beginning to fall over Richmond's downtown. "I met with the board last week. Officially announced my succession plan." "How'd they take it?" "Better than expected. David will become CEO in 3 years. I'll transition to chairman and focus on strategic oversight instead of daily operations." She leaned against the railing, watching snow accumulate on the city below. "Which means I'll have time for architecture. And us. And maybe figuring out who I am when I'm not performing the role I inherited." Marcus pulled her close, feeling her shiver slightly in the cold. Scared, terrified, she looked up at him, but also excited. "For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what comes next instead of just accepting what was chosen for me. I'm proud of you." "You keep saying that." "I'll keep saying it until you believe it." He kissed her forehead. "You've transformed yourself and the company in 1 year. That takes more courage than most people ever find." Inside the party, continued employees celebrating a year that had been hard, but transformative. Marcus and Tori stayed on the balcony a little longer watching snowfall and imagining futures that used to seem impossible. 3 years from now, Tori would step back from daily operations. Marcus's wellness programs would become industry standard, studied by other companies trying to figure out how to treat people humanely while maintaining profitability. The Craftsman bungalow would fill with the evidence of their separate passions, converging, architectural sketches mixed with manuscript pages, bike parts on the garage floor next to drafting supplies. But that was future. Right now they had snow falling and a party to return to, and the simple certainty that they'd built something worth protecting. Not perfect, never perfect, but honest and hard-won in theirs. The next morning, Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through their bedroom window, and Tori already up sketching at her drafting table in the sunroom. He made coffee and brought her a cup, watching her work with the kind of absorption she used to reserve for quarterly reports. "What are you designing? Our house, or the house we might build someday?" She showed him the sketch, something modern but warm with windows positioned to capture mountain light, and a workshop attached for whatever projects they decided to take on. Completely impractical, probably impossible to actually construct, but I wanted to see what it would look like if I designed something just for us. Marcus studied the drawing, seeing in it everything they'd become, the blend of her precision and his practicality, the space for individual pursuits that supported rather than competed. The foundation built to last because they'd done the math this time, calculated the load-bearing walls, ensured the structure could hold under real stress. "It's beautiful. It's a dream." She set down her pencil. "Maybe someday." Someday sounds good. They spent the morning in comfortable silence, Marcus writing the final chapter of his second novel, while Tori refined her design. Around noon, Jack called with a question about motorcycle maintenance, and Walter sent a text asking when they were coming back to Ohio because he'd found some old wedding photos of Marcus's mother that Tori might want to see. Building a life, Marcus realized, wasn't about dramatic gestures or perfect moments. It was about mornings like this, coffee and creative work, and the people you loved checking in because you mattered to them. It was about choosing each other again and again through conflicts and doubts and the inevitable friction of two people learning to build something together. Outside, Richmond prepared for another year. Inside the Craftsman bungalow, Marcus Brennan finished the sentence he was writing, looked up at Victoria Hayes' bent-over architectural drawings, and felt grateful for every mistake and choice that had brought him to this moment. The Triumph sat in the garage, ready for whatever roads they decided to explore. The novel manuscript grew daily evidence that finishing was possible when you stopped sabotaging yourself. Tori's portfolio expanded with buildings that would never be constructed, but proved she could create beauty when given permission. This was what success looked like, Marcus thought, not the corner office or the impressive title or the salary that made his father nervous, but the quiet Sunday morning with the woman he loved, both of them building things that mattered because they'd finally learned that they mattered. Tori looked up from her work, caught him watching, smiled. "What?" "Just thinking about how far we've come." And from that night in the rain, she stood cross to where he sat. "Feels like a lifetime ago and yesterday at the same time." "Do you regret any of it?" "Not a single second." She kissed him slow and sweet. "Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, because those are what proved we could survive." Marcus pulled her onto his lap, manuscript temporarily forgotten. "So what comes next?" "Everything." Her eyes held his with that intensity he had fallen in love with, the one that said she was fully present in this moment. "We finish your book. Build my community center. Plan a wedding that won't give my assistant a nervous breakdown. Take that cross-country trip on the Triumph you keep talking about." "That's a lot of everything." "We've got time." She settled against his chest. "For the first time in our lives, we actually have time." Outside, snow continued falling, blanketing Richmond in white, that would melt by afternoon, but right now transformed everything into something clean and new. Inside the house they'd chosen together, Marcus Brennan and Victoria Hayes sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that the real story wasn't about the dramatic moments, the rain-soaked confessions or boardroom battles or proposals in empty garages. The real story was this: two people who'd been running from themselves or learning to run toward each other instead, who discovered that freedom wasn't about being alone, but about being fully yourself with someone who saw you, who'd built something honest and hard-won and strong enough to last. In 3 years, Tori would step back from Hayes Industrial, and Marcus's programs would become the new normal. But those were just details, the external markers of internal transformation. What mattered was the choice they made every morning to keep building, keep choosing, keep showing up for each other and themselves. That was the inheritance they'd claim, not money or titles or companies built by previous generations, but the courage to define success on their own terms, to measure worth not in productivity, but in wholeness, to understand that sometimes you had to break completely before you could rebuild yourself into something authentic. Marcus returned to his novel, the final chapter flowing easily now. Tori went back to her drafting table, pencil moving across paper with increasing confidence. The craftsman bungalow settled around them like a structure built to last because the foundation was sound and the people inside had learned what actually mattered. Outside, Richmond moved through another Sunday. Inside, two people who'd found each other in crisis were learning what it meant to find each other in peace. And that, Marcus thought, as he typed the last words of his book, was the best story of all.